How does that sound? Everybody hear me? Yeah. Great. Well, I'm sponsored here, so I can wear my teacher's logos on my neck. So I better put this on just in case. And we go to commercial, and everybody can see this logo. Just playing. Although he will be thrilled when he sees this in a photograph. So, how many of you guys have been here for the whole weekend? You guys having fun?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Well, it's quite a spectacle. I'm glad you guys took the time to come in here. Usually people are just escaping from the heat to come in, so I appreciate it. You're here to actually listen to me. But my name is Jessie. I'm a past president of our Bonsai Club, and I've been doing bonsai for about 26, 27 years now. It's my passion. It's part of my lifestyle. I'm very deep into it. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit just about the art of bonsai, and then I'm going to talk specifically about what I think a lot of people are drawn to as beginners or non-practitioners. If you walk through the exhibit, a lot of people stop at the forest displays. They kind of evoke something special and to people. So I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to put one together. So we'll just kind of get into that. Feel free to raise your hand and ask questions. If I don't notice a hand up, feel free to yell hey. And I don't mind that. I love being engaged with the crowd. So if you guys have questions as we go, please just shout out.
Yeah. What does bonsai mean?
Okay, we'll get there. I can get you that. Anything else you guys want me to talk about? All right, well, we'll get started. So we'll get started with you. At the rawest sense, bonsai is pronounced bone. Sai, not bonsai, bonsai. Bone is a translation to tray, like a ceramic. Sai is a tree. So really the literal translation is a tree and tray. We've tried to find other ways to describe it, and everybody in their mind, even people that really haven't seen bonsai, know what it is because they've heard of it or whatever. You say, I grow trees in pots, they're just like, what? I grow bonsai. So, but yeah, bonsai, it's a bone and then sai, not a Z, not an A. And so that's the literal translation. Bonsai has been documented for centuries. It really harkens back to ancient China. And then as the Japanese do, they kind of appropriated it and made it better, or in their sense better, more refined, more aesthetically driven. Whereas the Chinese, it was more about evoking a sense or tying you back to nature. So they liked very raw material right off the mountainside without any touch of man. They wanted to see nature in its rawest. Whereas the Japanese their idea is you don't want to know that the hand of man touched it, but you want perfection. You want it to look as best as it can. And so that also focuses on horticulture and health. So I'd say, around the 700 AD is really when some of those first Japanese trees were documented by the Zen Buddhist monks that had brought that art from China. So, but there are depictions of it in ancient Indian texts, and even some things that were thought to possibly be trees in Egyptian art. So it's pretty interesting. Now it is a global phenomenon. In fact, every major country has bonsai clubs. Some of them have their own take on what bonsai is. You go to South Africa, they use their native trees there. They have some very interesting trees and styles. You go to Australia, they have their own scene there. And it's become an international movement where a lot of the artists know each other throughout the world. So it has grown into something that has morphed out of a very traditional art into something being adapted to everybody's tastes and wants within their own cultures, which is very interesting. We're able to progress and really put out there this traditional art, but at the same time, there's a drive from people to be connected to nature. So it's not dying like a lot of the traditional arts. It's actually really growing right now because a lot of people with urban environments, lots of natural habitats, are looking for ways in which to connect. So something like this forest over here, I mean, that will pull you in the second you see it. I mean, it's the first thing you looked at when you came into the room. If you were able to come up close, which I'll invite you up here. I don't know if you guys have the insurance to have all these people come up and look at this, but maybe I can pull it down a little closer to you guys at the end of the talk. But I was inspired by a similar design at the Chicago Botanic Garden about 15, probably closer to 20 years ago. That inspired me to build this tree. I call it a tree, it's multiple trees. This was actually traveling in 2 weeks to the U.S. National Show. I'm hitting one of my bucket list items, and I'm going to display this at the National Show. It'll be published in a book. So this is Boulevard Cypress. Bonsai is not a type of tree. Bonsai is an art. You can use pretty much anything that has woody growth habit, everything from herbs to shrubs to full-size trees. In nature, this tree can reach 40, 50 feet. And so part of the art of bonsai, the sai, the pot, or the bone, the pot is a tool. It helps keep the growth slower. It also is a part of the art. It acts as a framework to present the tree. So that's probably one of the main questions I get is it a type of tree? And it's like, no, really, you can do anything. Many years ago in my younger days when I was more rambunctious and wanted to try everything, I actually had a poison ivy bonsai. It bit me too many times, so that thing had to leave the yard. But bonsai is a lot of fun because you get to experiment, see how these things grow. Every tree has different needs. A tree like this likes to grow in a forest situation, so it's very appropriate for that style and the style that I want to talk about today. Any questions? Yeah.
How do you get the tree not in the root down and not in the nutrients?
Okay. So that gets back to the pot again. It will get root bound after a couple of years. One of my favorite ways to describe bonsai cultivation is it's like a rising phoenix. There are documented trees that have been around in pots for 800-900 years, handed down generation to generation. So every few years, these trees will get root bound. Being root bound will slow the growth down, which is great, but after a point, it will resist taking water in, it won't have any fine feeder roots to really take in nutrients, and it'll start to decline. Trees in the ground hit a maximum height limit, usually because they don't have surrounding trees to help them grow even taller. Can you imagine what the US looked like before we cut all the trees down? I mean, white pines would grow 200 feet everywhere because it was a forest. Now we're limited, they're not held up by their neighbors, but also trees in the ground eventually hit maximum capacity for as far as their roots can grow, everything else to the age they decline. A tree in a pot can theoretically live forever. I don't know if I'm going to be around long enough to prove that, but what you do every couple of years, you pull it out of the pot, you cut off all the oldest roots, and when you cut off a root, it'll grow a new root. It'll grow lots of new roots, not lots of fine roots. So essentially, it's reborn. You can keep these trees forever young with that technique. And so we go through, we do a repot. It reinvigorates the tree. Usually that first year, you get a lot of growth again. And so that is one way we keep the trees small. It is also how we keep them very healthy because we're always recycling and giving them new roots. So the phoenix rises. You had a question? So this particular forest here, like I said, I was inspired about probably 20 years ago by a similar group planting at the Chicago Botanical Garden. So I was like, I want to do that. I want one like that. And it's a big grouping. So I spent a couple years scouring nurseries, looking for these trees, buying them when I saw them in nursery pots, multiple sizes. I had twice as many as this on my driveway for a couple of years, just so I would have options when I decided to put it together. So I put it together, I think in 2016, probably the early part of 2016. So the trees were probably about 7, 8 years old at that point. Also, while they were on my driveway, these smaller trees, I actually took cuttings and rooted them so I would have smaller trees to add to the composition. And so I've been working on this tree pretty solidly for 11, 12 years. And so that is one of the things when we build a forest, we're looking for material. It is an art of patience. It's actually an art of impatience. I mean, finding the trees was really difficult, but it's also kind of a fun journey. It connected me a little bit more to the composition. Yeah.
Yeah, during the winter, where are you storing those cereals?
So I like to grow hardy trees. So hardy trees are trees that grow on the ground around us. You know, they go through the 4 seasons. They need to go dormant in the winter. These trees all need to go dormant in the winter. These guys will color up in the fall. They're going to drop their leaves. And so they need that dormancy period. The best way that I do most of my trees, especially some of these bigger conifers, is I put them on the ground, out of the sun, and out of the wind. I'll put a little bit of mulch around the pots. We just don't want them to freeze and thaw. So when they're on the ground, they're insulated by the ground, because the ground temperatures don't change really quickly. So if you have a 30-degree day and it jumps to 65 in January, which sometimes it does, that pot will stay down in the 30s because it's mulched. So that's how I overwinter most of my trees. A lot of people like to work with tropical trees, and so they're in the house, under lighting, probably with fans and a whole lot of insecticide, because if you get into tropical trees, those bugs come into. But I do that with these guys, and then some of the things like maples have a lot of sugar in their sap. So mice and squirrels like to take little nibbles off them in the winter, so I like to protect them a little bit more. So I'll usually put them in an unheated garage or a little cold frame, or just build a wall structure fence around them or something like that, and they can stay outside as well. Mm-hmm. Yes?
You said that demonstration right there, multiple trees. How many trees are there in that, or how did you start off with?
Well, so initially the main trees I started off with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The great thing about that though is this main tree here had a second trunk on it, and this one did. So there you have 7, and then I added another 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 trees in there. Well, there's 15 total. And some of those small ones actually do have little multi-trunks, so it could be 17. So yeah, it's a lot more trees in there than you might think. And so with a forest display and design, typically you want varying sizes. You have your parent trees and your secondary growth. But it's not always the case. Sometimes you're driving through a field and or through the countryside, and in a field on the crest of a hill you might see like a population of locusts or something, and they're all the same size, exactly, And so forests, this one was built as a close-up view forest. So when you look at it, you feel almost like you're inside it. Something like this, which I'll explain the shoots on it, is something you might view from far away. So there's a lot of little trunks, and they're all about the same size. And until you really get down and look into it, it doesn't really invite you in, but it reminds you of something you might see from a distance, like a grove or a copse trees.
I just had an additional question.
Sure.
Are those all the same trees right in there? It's all the same?
They're all the same species, which is why took cuttings for the smaller trees so that I would be able to plant smaller trees that were the same as the parents.
And sorry if you've already said, but how old is that one on the left, the oldest tree?
The oldest tree, well, I bought it in I think it was about a 10-gallon nursery pot. And so that would have probably been probably in 2012. And so at that point, it had probably been, I would say it was probably planted in 2005. So it's probably about 20 years old. Yeah.
Trees like cypress and rocky, or names, or separate, trees that move off the roots. You, do those?
Not on this variety, but yeah, I do have some trees that will do that. So I'll have additional shoots come up from the roots. And if I like where it is, sometimes I'll leave it. If I don't, I'll just cut it off. Yes. Oh.
I just want to.
Oh, go for it.
What kind of substrate do you use?
I'll get into that in a little bit. Mhm.
I noticed the water consumption in summer is growing, just to learn, water use.
So in the summertime, I water this every day. On the hottest days, sometimes I'll miss it after work when I get home, or even give it a secondary water if it's really dry. On a dry, windy day, particularly, so sometimes twice a day. In the winter, maybe once a week. Yeah.
When you first started, what was your success versus failure?
Do I want to give you an honest answer? So when I first started, it was kind of one of those very cliche sort of ways. I was driving, I went to school in Columbia, Missouri, and I was driving past the mall, and there was a little guy had set up a van, and he was selling junipers that all looked the same, had the same swoop, kind of what everybody envisions before they really get into bonsai as a bonsai. So I bought one, and I was so happy with it, and carried it so delicately, and I put it in my windowsill, and I enjoyed it all year. And then the following spring I was looking at it, I was like, yeah, it's a little dull in color. And then a couple months later it was yellow, and then a couple months after that, everything fell off of it. And then I kept it and looked at the cool outline for a while, but it was pretty depressing. Well, I was studying horticulture at the time, but I was just an entry student when I bought it. By the end of it, I really understood, this tree needed to go through a dormancy period. I'm a student, I should have bought a ficus, something tropical that could stay inside year round and didn't need that cycle. So that was one of my failures. It's easy when you have a lot of responsibilities, a job and things, and only a couple trees to forget a watering or to forget something like that. So my first many years, there were some struggles, but I wanted to be successful. I was fascinated. I mean, some people really catch the bug. This is a lifetime journey for me. This will be with me until probably the day I die, unless I can hardly walk and move, and then I better give it to somebody so it doesn't decline itself. In Arthurian legend, when the king is gone, the land dies. And it's true. When you're not showing up and not doing what you need to do for the trees, they will decline. So, but yeah, I did have a lot of failures, but that's how you learn. And I had a lot of questions that I had to answer myself, which was years of experience. But on a basic level, with some of the easier trees, junipers, ficus, things like that, it's not a challenge as long as you know that you're taking care of a living thing and you make the commitment to keep it alive. Sure. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, a lot of times you see that the tree has a bend in it, like the Indians did. How do you make that bend?
We'll get into that a little bit too, but I can tell you real quick. I put wire on a couple of these, so if I have time, I'm gonna put it together for us. So I'll try to get to that in another 10 to 15 minutes. But I put wire on a couple of these just because they weren't in the right spot. You couldn't really tell what they were doing. So the wire can be a paintbrush, as a pruner can, but pruner is not going to set this trunk where I want it. So the wire will. So I can kind of manipulate what I want to do down to every last branch, which I've done on that thing, and it's taken me about 4 days. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
How do you know when it's time to repot?
So repot is, there's different nuances to it. If you have young trees that are growing really vigorously, they're probably growing roots really vigorously. Once they really settle into a pot, become more mature like this, they don't grow as fast. So those younger trees, sometimes I'm repotting them every year. The older trees, something like this, I probably repot every 4 or 5 years. And the repotting changes as they get older too. With something like this, I'm not cleaning out all the soil. I'm just cutting off the oldest roots and maybe cleaning out some of the soil in the center at the bottom, and then putting new soil around it, setting it back in, and then teasing that soil into the existing roots. Whereas something young, I might take most of the soil out of the roots and give it a full, fresh bit of soil. So it just depends. We do have some club brochures up here. I think the best way to learn things like that is to come and learn with people. And I mean, there's a lot of great resources online and with books, but doing it by hand with people is great. We do workshops. We have a repotting workshop in the spring, sometimes 2. And so there's also a ton of videos online and stuff on how to do it. I think a lot of people are pretty nervous about it, but it really is a fairly simple thing. The thing about repotting is you get to get dirty, which I like. And it also gives you the opportunity to change angles, maybe, or give the lady a new dress. You know, sometimes they just need that. Yes?
Is the water that you use based on, let's say, the tree or is it aesthetic?
Yeah, it's typically aesthetic. And so when you learn to wire, it's a functional process, but you want it to look really beautiful as you wire too. So there's a lot of learning that goes into that. But at first, you're just using that wire in the best way possible to get those shapes. And the thing I will say, when you wire a tree to style it, you don't want to fight what the tree wants to already do. You know, if you have a tree that wants to grow vertically and you're trying to put a big twist and bend in it, a lot of times it's not going to respond really well, or it's going to look really goofy. You're going to say, all right, I've never seen a maple do that. Now, I may have seen a banyan do that or something that you see in somewhere else, but it is for aesthetics. Like I said, I like to call it kind of the paintbrush. It's for refinement and for setting the branches, and then also positioning them in a way where that foliage pad is getting the best sunlight, or maybe moved to create a view inside, or to get sunlight onto the branch below it, something like that. Back there.
How do you physically get the forest out of the pot?
So I have kind of like a scythe. I don't think I brought it. So what I do is I cut the wires off that hold the tree. We'll talk about that when I get into the forest, but I do wire the tree into the pot. So I will cut those off, and then I'll basically saw around the whole pot without chipping the pot, and then usually it just pops right out, and then I'll do the root work after that. Yeah.
What kind of soil mixtures?
I'll get into that in a minute when I get into the forest. So.
Can you talk a little bit about training, going from like a nursery pot like that, getting you down into something that's super thin and
Sure.
shallow like that?
Yeah. Well, when we do this, I'll do that because this is not the ideal time of the year to repot trees. Like I said, I've been doing this for about 25, 26 years, so I have a fair amount of experience. I know how to handle something like that. I used to come to this and sit out there with you guys back at the start of my journey, and we used to bring in artists to do this. And I remember at that point knowing enough, like, oh my God, this is the wrong time of the year to do it. And I would still say it is the wrong time of the year to do it. However, those guys we used to bring in and pay them to come in. They weren't caring for the trees afterwards. Somebody else had to. I've never seen those trees after that demo. I would hate to do a demonstration for you guys just for entertainment and then for the trees to die. So I'll talk about that as we go. Yes? Moss? Moss is typically, there's many reasons for moss. When you see the moss growing on the trees in the exhibit, that is for aesthetics. That's usually placed there right before the show. In Japan, soil and dirt is considered a very dirty thing. It doesn't come into the house. You don't wear your shoes into the house. You don't bring a tree into the house unless it's got moss on it and you don't see the soil. So moss, horticulturally, will often put sphagnum moss on the top of the soil and then maybe mix in like live moss, and then it'll grow on top of the soil, which adds another insulation level like mulch does in a garden. And then it allows fine beetle roots to grow into that moss. And it looks beautiful in the garden. We live in St. Louis, so moss does not grow like it might in Oregon. So sometimes my moss is fairly blackened by the end of the summer, and then it'll green up as the fall kicks in again. This doesn't have any moss on it because I've been cleaning it up and cleaning the roots and cleaning the bark, because this is going to a big exhibition in a couple weeks. So I'm still working on that process. I spent about probably 6 hours cleaning the bark last week. So it's got a long ways to go still. So I'm busy after this.
You're talking about putting moss in like with the forest. Do you do other like undergrowth as well?
Yeah, especially with the forests and the landscape kind of plantings. You can do small shrubs. You can do ground covers, things like that. So this typically, there's a couple popping back up that I pulled in the back, but just a little skullcap perennial that pops up in it. It's really kind of cool looking, especially when it pops up in the back, because it gives you a little more distance perspective. But yeah, you can certainly grow live plants. You don't usually want a full-on ground cover because they'll compete with a tree. You want to get really nerdy about it. Sometimes maybe that competition will slow the tree down, and maybe it'll help you with your training and making that tree grow a little slower. But usually, like if you have a lot of weeds or something in the pot, it'll actually overcompete with the tree and take all the nutrients out of the soil. Yes.
When you're planning a new project, are you planning this project in this pot and it stays that way? Like you're not growing out of a pot and changing pots?
No, it's ever changing. So we are working with living art or living things. And so this pot, I actually found this pot last year at a show in San Francisco. It was in a little bit of a smaller pot, but also more of a square edged pot, like a rectangle. That didn't really highlight some of the nice movement in the trees, the bends. It was a little too formal for the planting. And so this looks a lot nicer with this oval. I don't know if you can see it from the front. But so yeah, you're always changing based on aesthetics and where the tree is in its life. And sometimes if it's a tree that struggles in a small pot, maybe you grow it in a bigger pot and then just put it in that small pot for an exhibition or something like that. If you have an antique pot or something like that you want to showcase, but you don't want maybe getting broken in your garden. Okay. Yes.
When you transport that to your show, is there any special thing that you have to continue?
Well, ibuprofen helps with my back because it really hurts. It's heavy. But no, I'll the soil is pretty much fixed. It's its own root system at this point. I've scraped off most of the soil off the top anyway, so I can highlight what the roots are doing. I will add moss, and that will travel in the back of my truck. I'll just really try not to get any accidents or anything like that. Go slow over some of those bouncy bridges and stuff like that. But yeah, for transport, really it's about trying to make sure you don't break the pot. Yeah.
Fertilize that or is it all that?
Fertilize for sure. Yeah. So right now with a tree like that, that's just organic fertilizer that I have on it. And sometimes I'll give it a liquid feed every few weeks. But these little cups hold these nice little fertilizer pellets that I like to use. Since that's not a level, flat soil pot, I need something like this to hold the fertilizer in place. So every time I water, it distributes to the roots. And so in a few weeks, I'll add more, and I'll put these guys just in a different spot. But then liquid fertilizers work really well if you've got a well-rounded, low NPK, and then micronutrients. So you can use just about any fertilizer. Yes?
Where do you get most of your pots for?
Everywhere. I'm always on the hunt. I'm always looking. If you saw my garage, you would think I was insane. It's kind of embarrassing. People drive past it when it's open, but there's pots everywhere. We like to say you never have the right pot. I mean, it's true. You've got a repot and you're like, man, I don't like the way that looks now. Or that's just too small or a little too big, so you're always looking for pots. So this is a great place. We have a few people selling pots out of here, great pots. Online you can find them. There are some auction sites, even on Facebook, that are fantastic for finding pots. I bought this one at a convention in San Francisco last year. There's a long story there getting it back here, but it is a 28-inch pot, so that's quite large. 28-inch pots done like that too are not cheap, so you really want to make sure you're protecting your pots. But yeah, you can find them in all shapes and sizes. This is a pretty standard forest pot that I purchased a number of years ago from a bonsai vendor. Yeah.
Would you buy one? Would you want to buy a hat already?
Starting from seed would take a very long time. People try it. I like to start with cuttings or what you would call free bonsai, something that's been kind of worked on to eventually be a bonsai, like maybe somebody really worked on the trunk and then, but didn't do any branch work, because if you do it all at once, the tree just doesn't grow. Sometimes you need to really grow something. So I could kind of get into this. This was all seedlings. You might be wondering about this guy here. Well, in forest design and display, it's pretty rare that all the trees are going to be the same age, and it's visually not that appealing. Something like this will help a trunk thicken up. So I'm going to grow this for a long time. I'm not going to display this tree for a number of years. This is a sacrifice. I'm developing actually what will be the top of the tree down here, but this will get cut off. And having this over time will really thicken that trunk up. It's already thicker than the other trees, but it's still quite small. And so you can go that route, starting with seedlings, or you could talk to me after the show and make me an offer on that. And then walk away saying I'm insane. But some people will spend some insane amounts of money on finished trees too. All right, well, I do want to try to put something together a bit about it. I know I talked about the distant view. What I'm going to do is going to be something we're viewing a little closer up. This is a very old forest I put together in 2005, so it hasn't really grown a ton. From your perspective, probably it's very small. But if you get up in here, you'll see a lot of age and character, and just really subtle movements that you only get with age in this tree. So I encourage you after the demo to come up and take a closer look inside. So please ask questions as I go. I'm gonna do a quick kind of explanation of how you put a forest together. Talk a bit about the soils that these guys are in. So in the past, I had mentioned I'd seen demos up here, and I'm like, man, there's no way those trees are gonna live. Well, I'm gonna put these in a very deep pot, not do a lot of root work, and then I'll have plenty of capability with that, and then with my own care to keep these things alive. And then if you join our club, we will auction this off at our next club auction. So when you're designing a forest, usually you have a parent tree or a primary tree, something that's interesting, gives you a great view. And then from that, you step down to a secondary tree. So you have your primary, secondary. Really, it's about moving your eye and keeping it within the composition. And there's multiple ways to approach it. You can use a lot of trees. You could do a really subtle, maybe 5 trees. You have 3 over here and a couple just hanging off over here, something you might see at the edge of the forest. So we're gonna pick out the primary tree, which is typically the tallest and probably the thickest, which to me appears to be this one. Usually in a forest, you would offset that primary tree probably at about a third, but I usually like it a little closer to center, especially with a group like this. And then you would figure out, okay, well, I have a nice primary here, great movement, probably don't need that. This is probably going to be the top, so that'll give us the option to cut off, which we will do. We have specialty tools. This is called a concave cutter. This will allow you to cut real flush to the trunk. I'm, for health's sake, going to leave a stub on this, and then I'll cut that off later. But this is going to be our main tree. Interesting thing is I do have a secondary trunk on it. So very much like my main tree in that, it's kind of great. It adds a little variation in size and interest. So I will probably put a wire on that, wire it up a little bit more, because trees in forests don't usually grow up to the side. They're all trying to grow up and get that light. Any questions as I kind of work through these selections? Yeah.
How much wire do you have on that?
How much wire do I have on a tree?
No.
Oh, yeah, let me get into that too. So I prepared the pot before you guys came in. So we need good draining pots. So there are holes in this pot. And what we use is a screening that I've wired into that to hold the soil in the bottom of the pot. So as we water, it will drain through, but the soil will stay in the pot. And then I also use those holes, put all these wires in. It's not attractive, but it's purely utilitarian at this point. This is a plastic pot or a mica pot, great as a grow pot, very deep. Aesthetically for a forest, you want something a little flatter to present the tree, but right now we're not really worried about aesthetics, we're worried about horticulture. We're worried about keeping these alive. So that's why I selected this pot. Okay, so we have a primary tree. I don't know if we will use all these trees. I wanted to bring enough for an option. I think I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 9 pots, 10, 11, 12, 13, because some of these have double or multiple trunks. 14. Typically we want odd numbers in design, but once you get past about 11 trees, nobody's counting, nobody knows. I mean, we could all try to guess how many trees are in here, every one of you, and probably wrong. By the end of it, one of you might get it, but so I might use them all, I might dumb it down. We'll see. These are growing in a lava mixture right now. The soil we typically use is a very heavy aggregate soils, often volcanic based, but we want aggregate soils that will allow water and air to come through. The primary things trees need, water and air. Nutrients come later. Feeding and supplements are secondary. So we need good particles with good cation exchange capacity and other things like that. So typically we use lava, humus, a clay material that is often imported from Japan called akadama. There are other aggregates people like to use in warmer, hotter climates. A lot of people use actual like fir bark that has been screened and things like that. But I don't like to use organic material in my soil mixes unless I'm just doing propagation. So I think this might be a nice secondary tree. It has pretty good movement though, and we want our secondary and primary trees to kind of be have a lot of presence. Movement is great for presence in single trees, but in a forest composition, something that's a little more vertical might have better presence as one of your first 2 trees that's going to catch your eye. So I like both of these as options. This one's a little straighter, so I think I'll probably go with that. And so I would probably place one here, and then the third tertiary tree here is a really easy way to do it. But you can play with how they work together. So we'll kind of just see what these root systems look like and go from there. Because I do have this little tree here too. So I would rather not make a clump where all the trees are coming from a center place and working outward, I do want to present it as a forest. So yeah, we'll get into those roots and see what we want to do. But when we do lay out a forest, as you look at it from the front, you don't want any trees lined up to where this tree is directly behind this tree. And then as you look at it from the side, it's the same thing. And so you're really playing with where each tree goes. So visually, your finished product has visual interest. You can see into it, and you get a little depth of field. That makes sense? All right. Any questions as I pull these out of here?
Did you say what trees, these are?
Oh, I did not. So these are Chinese juniper, probably one of the more quintessential species in bonsai. They're very easy to work with. It is what everybody envisions, especially if you saw The Karate Kid. I grew up, my intro to bonsai was The Karate Kid. One of the first movies I saw in the movie theater, actually. And so I'm going to do very little root disturbance on these because they have been growing in lava. They're not going to have a really strong root system, kind of loose. I'm just going to lightly break these apart. And whatever doesn't want to fall away, I'm not going to encourage it to fall away. Now, if this were the spring, I would be a lot more aggressive to these root systems. But I'm just going to I think I can come up with a pretty nice composition by not really getting into it. And so a lot of times people use like a drainage layer or a thicker layer of rock at the bottom and then the finer soil at the top, which is pretty much all the same size aggregate. Quite dirty at this point. I've been growing these on the ground for years, and so they get mulched in, and mulch moves down into the soil, worms move up, so, but I mean, that's a nice little root ball. And so I could probably, in order to move this a little closer to another tree, maybe work one side a little bit. But we're not gonna try to disturb too many of the roots today, because I do want all of these to thrive. So this particular species, Chinese juniper, pretty commonly sold at garden centers and nurseries, but this is a variety of it called Shinpaku, which has a very fine needle, which proportionally for bonsai looks beautiful. If you go through our show, you'll see a lot. So this one really doesn't need much work at all. Just a little bit of a shake. And I think I want to continue with some of the more straight trees. And then as we get towards the sides, we'll look at some of those trees that move out for the sun, which I do have a nice little group here. I don't know if I'm going to use this, but there's like 5 trees in there. I'm worried it might all fall apart, so we'll see. Yeah, so these will be great to work with. The original grower liked to use lava. I don't like to use pure lava. I just, you can see that the roots don't want to grow down all the way into it. But it is a great media. It carries a lot of nutrients, holds a lot of air, and actually can stay fairly moist. But for vine bonsai, for more finished trees, you want a mixture of maybe a little bit of lava, pumice, and some sort of clay material like hakadama. Some people like to use turfus, which is essentially like oil dry or something you would put in your garage floor to pick up oil. That I use more for propagation too. But you can buy pre-made bonsai mixes online, which I would encourage anybody here to do. So you don't have to get into buying a lot of different aggregates trying to make your own soil. There's a lot of great pre-mixed products out there. And I think both Timber Winds Nursery and Garden Heights Nursery here in St. Louis carry those. So I have a lot of trees here that are close to about the same size, so I definitely do wanna pick a couple that are gonna be smaller. This is really great, little double trunk. And I'm gonna look at what this has and what this might just kind of go off to the side. This has some good side movement. It's a little smaller, and so are these, but let's kind of play with these trees and see where that movement goes. If I go a little over an hour, am I good, schedule-wise? All right. I can't remember
Yes,
what it
it
was.
should be fine.
Okay. Any questions? Comments?
Fascinated.
So I've been doing this for 25 years. Actually, a little before that, when I was going to college, I studied landscape design and horticulture. I came into one of my classes one day, and on the tables were trees looking just like this. Another table was a table full of rocks, and another table was the table full of pots. And our teacher had us match a tree to a rock to a pot, and we created our own little thing. I lived in an apartment. That thing did not live long either. So there you go, back to trials and errors. But to this day, I'm still very close with that first bonsai teacher of mine. He was my landscape teacher, about 87 years old and retired in Colombia. Still has a beautiful garden and waters every day. He said this is what keeps him alive. He's been dealing with this stage 4 cancer for years, and he's kind of a poster child for having something that really keeps his mind and body active and positive thinking. So it's a journey for all of us that want to take it on, and it's a very positive thing. So I'm going to just start by adding, this is going to, if this were a finished tree, I would have a very consistent size in all this. This is pretty close. This is a mixture of a lot of different aggregates that I've just used from some past projects, grow projects, and things like that. Since this isn't refined, I'm going to just use some of this used soil. I heat this up on tarps in the sun after it's used to kind of cook off any potential fungus or anything like that that may have come with other trees. But it's a great way to recycle some of the soils because they can get quite expensive, especially if you have 85 pet trees on your benches. I don't know who has 85 trees on their benches, but there's some people that do. I'm sorry?
Is that soil less nutrient-based than you're using?
Yeah, it doesn't really have a lot of nutrients in it. I mean, there are minerals in this soil mix, but it's a very porous mix. All these materials will hold water. But the most important thing is that it'll allow oxygen to travel through. Soil that would grow, like, if I were to dig up a bit of soil from out here, the garden has beautiful soil. It's been worked for years. But regular garden soil is not going to allow the tree to grow the kind of roots we want in here. The tree is just going to, after a while, languish, stay too wet, not allow a whole lot of oxygen penetration through. And so it's not a great situation for cultivation in a pot like this. So we use these because this allows the root system to divide, become dynamic, and take in lots of nutrients through all those fine roots that it creates. All right, so here's our primary tree. This thing's bugging me. It's too high up on the trunk to really make it a secondary trunk. In nature, you might see that, these trees want to grow vertical in nature. And so you might see some of those lower branches become driven by the sun and want to grow straight up, but it's pretty rare. And so I'm just going to remove it because wiring it up, I think it would just look a little awkward. And so I'm going to figure out what I did with my concave cutter.
underneath.
Oh, well, I have others.
So now, talking about tools, what do you recommend for beginning bonsai?
So beginning bonsai, my main recommendation is to start with a good pair of scissors that are comfortable in your hand and that have a really perfect fine point. A pair like this, about $35 online. You can get some at garden centers that might not have as fine of a point. It's a good place to start, but this allows me to get in. I can cut every little fine tip up here if I wanted to. So you start with a good pair of scissors, and then that concave cutter I showed you, and then quickly lost.
Look under the pot,
What's that?
look under your pot,
Right?
the other,
No,
the big one, the big
the big one. It's probably actually under the soil in the pot. It's that one. There you go. And then this concave cutter comes in multiple sizes, has a flat edge. It's great for getting in and removing branches. One this size is perfect for just about every application because these points do meet at a very fine angle. Now you can get this in lots of different shapes and sizes. I have a very small, very angled one that I like to use for some of my smaller trees. Getting into some of these very small ones, you're getting into higher prices. But you don't really need that until you're kind of getting into more advanced situations of scissors, this cutter, wire cutters. This is a bonsai wire cutter. This is also a bonsai wire cutter. This is a very cheap one that I use the most. I use this a lot too. It has a very flat edge, so when you cut your wire off your branch, it doesn't cut into the branch as long as you're not pushing. So the wire cutters are great. Those are really the main tools you need. And then a good chopstick. Believe it or not, I use chopsticks for all kinds of stuff. A lot of times actually when I set up a forest, I'll have a matrix of chopsticks wired together down here so I can attach wires at all different places to it. But I use the chopsticks to do all my root work, cleaning roots off, things like that. It's just the perfect tool. So who knew? But we all know now. Any other questions? Yeah.
So we got a pretty done bonsai from Costco, and we had no idea what we were getting into. So it's starting to get a little dry and brittle. Could you talk about how or if we can revive that?
Do you know what the species is? Juniper? Okay. Well, that's the first key in anything is to know what the species is. If a juniper is getting dry and not flexible, it's probably gone over the hump. And you're going down the same path I did when I started. So what I like to do too is if it's in a soil, the first year, if it's in the spring, I'll repot right away so I know it's in a good soil mix. Some of those store-bought trees, you just don't know what the mix is, and a lot of times they'll glue the top particles on so that they can travel in shipment, and when they get knocked over, when they're being put onto the racks, they don't fall off. And so water doesn't travel through that really well. So you just kind of have to be careful and really inspect when you're buying a tree from a box store like that. Have I done it? Yes. Was I successful? Yeah. But oftentimes with junipers, a juniper can even maybe not be alive when it's still green. It's already kind of gone over that hump. I can tell from the color, like it'll be a duller color when that happens, but I'm sorry. Now, if you do have trees and mixes like that that are really resistant to water, what I do like to do is I will just put the tree in a bucket of water and you'll see bubbles coming out of that soil until it's saturated, and then I'll pull it out. And then usually watering every day after that, since you got it saturated, it will usually stay wet as long as you're watering it every day. So when you get into situations where things are drying, you can do that. Okay, so this is our primary tree. I like the movement of that tree. Ultimately, I'll cut this off because we want these guys to round out like that, but I mean, this is how how junipers and pines grow. They're very apically dominant and just shoot straight up. You see these tips on even the branches growing like that. And a lot of times when you're setting your trees up too, you want to see this has nice movement going this way. Maybe I want a repetition of that movement. Coming in this way might be a little bit weird, right? You want that repetition, and then once we get the tree set, in nature you don't see a lot of interior branches in forests growing at each other. And so then we'll start looking at, okay, well, how do we remove branches to make this look a little more beautiful? I won't be applying much wire today other than this wire to hold these trees in place. We don't really have time, and also I like to do mostly just one big operation at a time. If I were to put these in and then wire the whole tree out, it might be a little too stressful on the tree. I don't want to respect these living things that I love so much. Nice tree. That's also kind of a strange branch. I'll leave it for now, actually. This might kind of lean off to the side. And so I'm trying to work with these towards you. That could work like that. So I'm gonna have to step around in a little while and play with these, make sure I'm coming up with a nice concept. And so you want not only trees not in front or behind each other, you want variation in spacing. It's weird. I've seen a lot of beginners and a lot of things online where every tree is lined up like a soldier and they're all the same distance apart, and it's just not interesting. Not how trees grow in nature unless you're a tree farmer and you're making particle board. You're just not going to see that. It's really goofy. So sometimes we have to work really hard to cram a couple trees in close to each other because that is how they will grow in nature. And so I gave myself plenty of wires in this pot so I can really play with positioning and holding the trees in place. So it looks like I'll be able to add plenty more trees into here. This one has a really great root system, so I want to figure out where I want to put it before I remove part of it. Searching for life, that's what you would find in nature. So I think this off to the side here would be nice because then these smaller pieces actually move towards the back. So I'm going to find a way to squeeze them in next to this, and then I'll get down to business. So primary tree, secondary tree. Usually the tertiary tree wouldn't be towards the back, but I actually like the way the next largest tree in the center plays. So I'm just gonna try to squeeze it in right here. So this almost becomes a composition in itself. Nice different spacing with each other. This is where your eye is gonna go first. And then all the other trees are, they're almost as accessories to the parent trees. So I'm gonna just get these two wired in and keep these two close to each other. I'm actually gonna get some wire right around to really cram them close and make it kind of something believable you would see in the woods with trees growing right next to each other. And I'm gonna just remove that just because it looks weird, even though it will eventually get cut off anyway.
You take those clippings and recut them.
What's that? The
You take
cuttings?
the clippings and redo them.
You can use them, you can take cuttings off of something like this, especially these ends, they're ready and ripe for that. So usually you dip them in a rooting hormone and put it into a really fine propagation kind of mix.
And about how long does it start, the rooting hormone start working on the tree?
Junipers, it can take a couple of months. It depends on the time of the year and the follow-up on on care. So some people will give it bottom heat and really get into the propagation methods. Some people will just stick it into a pot, forget about it, and hope it roots, and often it does.
Is there
So
a book or a resource that you recommend for propagation?
for propagation, there's the Manual of Woody Plant Propagation. I forget who writes it, but it's still commonly found. And it'll tell you just about every species, what kind of rooting hormone you might need, and time of the year. It's a fantastic resource. It was one of those books that was one of the first horticulture books I bought after I got out of school.
Want an extra set of hands up there, Jesse?
What's that?
You need an extra set of hands up there?
Not yet, but I might call you up if I do. Appreciate that. We have a great club. Everybody's very helpful. David here's he's been around now a little while, but one of the newer members. And he's come on and started filming and photographing everything we do. It's fantastic. So joining the club is great because we get people that typically are drawn to this art, have all kinds of other interests too. So we have a really nice mix of people that are very creative and passionate about bonsai and other aspects of their art interests.
So how often do you guys meet as club members?
What's that?
How often do you meet as club members?
Okay, so our club meets the first Tuesday typically of every month here at the Botanical Garden at the Education Center on the corner of Shaw and Kings Highway, so just up the street. I have some handouts out front with QR codes you can scan or a website that will tell you where and when our meetings are. This month is typically a great recruitment month for us because of this show. Because of the holiday, we're not meeting the first Tuesday of the month, we're meeting the 16th. So I encourage you to come to Bonsai 101, where we talk about everything you need to know to get started, and come and meet people and just see what it's about. But you can also look on there to see what other subjects and topics we might be doing over the course of the next coming months. And then as we get into next year, we'll have updates as far as what our programming will be.
Seedlings and, showing what in the yard?
I have, in fact, all these seedlings grew under an amber maple in a park, and I just asked if I could volunteer to weed, and they got weeded, and I got trees. So these are all dug up. Those seedlings there all came from a trident maple here in the Japanese garden. I used to work at the Botanical Garden in the 2000s, and we have a lot of weeds coming up all the time, and so it was a great opportunity, and it allowed me to learn how do you propagate seedlings out of the ground. That forest, believe it or not, I didn't really put them into individual pots and get them healthy before building it. I just put them all in that pot, or its predecessor. This though, I actually grew them all before putting the group together for about a year. So there's different ways to do that. And so this is gonna be low in this pot. These root systems weren't as deep as I thought, so you're not gonna be able to see the bases of all this. But I do have a nice little group coming here on this side. I like the placement of these trees. But it is 4 trees, so I would like to get something else playing with this. And then there's a big space in here. So this double tree, I can kind of shift in, but I feel like I need something else back here as well. Spacing's getting kind of nice. This group of trees though, I need more off of these root systems. so I can get it even closer. Because like I said, spacing is very important for a forest to look interesting. If they're too far away and then also have the same spacing that a lot of the other trees have, it just doesn't read in a way that's interesting. Now that, to make this interesting, I just need to find a way to hold that in place, which I gave myself plenty of options with these wires. And I have a wire on this tree, so I can just bring it down to here. Alright, so it looks like I am going to use all of our trees. This is one of the smaller, medium-sized trees, so this will be a great tree to join these two as something in the back. Yeah, and a nice little jumping spider. Actually, I'm lying. That was a brown recluse. Came out of my garage. It came out of my garage, full of brown recluses.
What do you take for work now?
So now, oh, there you are. All right, it's toast. Not gonna get anybody here. I'm a director of horticulture for a small urban beautification nonprofit. So if you ever come into University City, if you're down dining on the Del Mar Loop, you'll see planters full of vibrant flowers, or if you come to any of our parks, you'll find garden beds, or any of our school district schools. So we do urban beautification. We're volunteer driven, and it's a fantastic job. And I've definitely found a lot of seedlings there. But I built a couple ginkgo forests from some of the seedlings I found out in University City.
When you take the seedlings and you propagate them,
Yes, I like to put them right into a good aggregate. So I'll watch all the soil I put them. Seedlings are young, strong, vigorous. So I'll cut most of the leaves off except for the top couple so they don't desiccate, and then I'll just put them right into an aggregate mix. And those root systems start growing almost immediately. So that guy is there. Let's see how I can use this. This is a fantastic movement on this tree. If I don't use it, this tree could be a great larger tree. I wish I could get it right next to this tree here. I don't think that's happening. Really nice little tree. I don't hate the gap in here. I don't know that I can get this into that gap. And that's the one thing I do like about building forests is sometimes when the tree tells you it's not gonna go somewhere, it probably tells you it's gonna be a little too contrived if you do put it there. So, when's the next event in here, Mike? I see you touching your watch.
Yeah, 11:30. I think they need to do a little setup though.
They need time to set up.
Okay, what time?
The next event is 10:30, but they need time to set up.
11:30, okay. All right, well,
Oh, 11.
we're gonna put this guy right here, and I'm gonna be very happy with that. So, I have the wire to get it in. So, any questions as I wrap up, and then I'll move everything down there while they set up. You can kind of take a look at that.
So what we've observed listening to you is that sometimes you've got concept in your mind, but as you pull each step to build your forest, really once you set it in, then you start, you might have to move it. So
Yes.
It takes the shape you have in your mind.
Yes, and a lot of times that is where some of the dynamic vision comes from. It's actually created by what the tree needs.
So then the last thing then is wiring and pruning.
Yes, the last thing would be wiring each tree, pruning, which obviously I don't have time to do, but like I said, for the health of the tree, it's definitely not something I want to do until these trees are actively showing me more growing tips. I will prune most of these tips off of here so that these secondary shoots really start to grow. And when I see that growth, I know this tree's doing just fine.
And it's not a quick one and done.
No, it's not a quick.
Now what are the years then on the tree?
Not a quick one and done. And these trees, like I said, were grown for many years before I even did that. So part of the journey of a forest starts with those first trees and making sure they're healthy before you really even do the work. So it is a process, highly enjoyable process, but like I said, you have to be very patient. Make sure you find the right trees and make sure they're healthy before you do anything with them. So I'm going to get off of the stage so this next group can start their setup. Any questions before that? So this is where we're at. Come a little closer. You'll see these trunks down below are actually quite a lot closer than they appear there. Aesthetically, not the final pot, but this will be a great grow pot. My next step is just to lightly work all the soil with a chopstick down into those root systems and then get some water on this, and then we're just gonna let it sit until next spring when I will probably start doing more wiring, styling, and things like that. So thank you for your time.
Off the wet